Hi, I'm Corinne Demas, and I'm going to be reading one of my picture books, The Disappearing Island, illustrated by the wonderful illustrator Ted Lewin. This story is about a real place, Billingsgate Island, which is off the coast of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The Disappearing Island by Corinne Demas, illustrated by Ted Lewin. For my 9th birthday, my grandma gave me a small box. Inside was a perfect sand dollar and a note. The note said, "To celebrate your birthday, we will voyage out to the disappearing island where I found this sand dollar when I was just your age." "How can an island disappear?" I asked. Grandma laughed. "When I take you out to Billingsgate Island, Carrie, you'll see," she said. I'd been all around Wellfleet Harbor in Grandma's boat, but this time we were going to go farther out into Cape Cod Bay, just the two of us, farther than I'd ever been before. Grandma's boat is named Aphrodite, after the goddess of love who first rose out of the sea foam. It's painted the blue of the sea on the outside and the blue of the sky on the inside. The next day we rowed out to Aphrodite in a rubber boat so small our legs were in a tangle. We clambered aboard Aphrodite and Grandma hooked the rubber boat to the mooring. To get the old outboard motors started, she had to pull the rope nearly 10 times. Her arms are all muscles from clamming and swimming and pulling. We put on our life jackets and I sat up in the bow and pretended I was a figurehead on one of the old ships that used to come into Wellfleet Harbor. Water sprayed me, but it was a hot day, so I didn't mind. When the tide is high in Wellfleet Harbor, the water is way over my head. When the tide is low, it just comes up to my middle. Grandma has a tide chart on her wall. It's like a calendar for the sea. There's low tide and high tide twice a day, and every day it's an hour different. The tide was going out now. A cormorant was drying out its feathers on a rock that hadn't been there an hour before. When we rowed out beyond the sheltered part of Wellfleet Harbor, the waves got higher, and I went to sit in the back of the boat with Grandma. "I don't see any island," I said. She passed me the binoculars. "Keep looking straight ahead," she told me. "At high tide, it's completely covered by water. It begins to appear as the tide goes out." Finally, we got close enough so I could see it, a flat stretch of beach out in the middle of the sea. We pulled into a cove and Grandma anchored Aphrodite. We waded to shore carrying our lunch basket and beach blanket. We laid out the blanket on a high sandy spot surrounded by rocks, the foundation for the old lighthouse, Grandma said. Then we went off to explore the island. There were no buildings, no trees, not even a blade of grass, just sand. The sand was all in long ripples made by the waves as the tide had gone out. I ran as far as I could run without stopping to catch my breath. Grandma ran beside me. "A century ago, this island was a mile long," Grandma explained. "This was a busy fishing community, and there were 35 homes here and a school. There were meadows and gardens. When the sea started eroding the island, people moved off and took their houses with them. When I was a little girl, my dad used to take me out here to go clamming. There was more of the island then than there is now, but no one lived here anymore. We were the only ones on the island, except for the gulls and the terns. There were shells everywhere, jingle shells and quahogs, razor clams and channeled whelks. Mussels, tiny as ants, covered the stones in the acres of tidal pools. They looked like black fur. I found a broken brick half buried in the sand. One side of it had been charred. This was from someone's chimney, Grandma said. May I keep it? Sure. The sea would claim it soon enough. We hiked back to our blanket and nearby I saw a strange rusty creature that looked like the backbone of a whale. It's the metal spiral staircase from the old lighthouse, lying on its side, Grandma told me. It was too big to carry back to safety on the mainland. That was the second lighthouse out here. The first one toppled into the sea. They built this one further inland, and they built it out of brick. They thought it would last forever, but the sea kept taking more and more of the island. They built a big breakwater out of rocks, but the sea just came around it. Grandma pointed to a curve of gray rocks that were covered with barnacles that looked like white lace. That's what's left of the breakwater, she said. Just around the time I was born, the last lighthouse keeper moved off the island. They built a tower with an automatic light, and that winter, the big brick lighthouse was knocked down by the sea in a storm. Now the light tower is gone as well. I lay back on the blanket and closed my eyes. The hot sun made everything swimming in orange under my lids. While I listened to Grandma talk, I imagined it was 100 years ago. I've come to the island to visit my friend, whose father is the lighthouse keeper. They live in the brick house that is attached to the lighthouse. She comes running to meet my boat with her little dog barking at her heels. In the yard, there are some well-fed pigs, a flock of chickens, and a nasty rooster who thinks he owns the whole island. In the garden beside the house, the tomatoes are as red as the lobster buoys piled by the dory on the beach. There are roses growing by the doorway and bees humming in the lavender. Inside the lighthouse, it's cool as a cave. It takes a while for my eyes to adjust to the darkness. We climb up the spiral staircase to the top of the lighthouse and step outside into the glimmering sunshine on the walkway that circles the great lamp. I can see to Provincetown and beyond. I can see as far as anyone has ever seen before. Ships with sails as white as my summer dress are making their way along the horizon. The rooster, who's practicing for sunrise, starts to crow. A rooster was crowing. I opened my eyes, but it wasn't a rooster. It was a herring gull who thought he owned the island. In the basket, Grandma had packed sandwiches and leftover birthday cake from my party the day before. She lit a candle, and the wind and I blew it out together. Grandma sang, "Happy birthday +1." Someday, she said, this island will be completely gone, and you'll tell your granddaughter how you came out here and picnicked on it at low tide. I'll show her the brick as proof, I said. Now the tide was coming back in. It moved slowly at first, as if making up its mind, and then it started claiming the edges of the beach. Grandma stroked the smooth sand beside her. In this modern world, people can do almost anything, she said. We cut canals and build long bridges and dam rivers. We've tamed almost everything. I'm glad we haven't completely tamed the ocean, too. What I love about a place like this is that it reminds us that nature can still have its way once in a while. Grandma stood up. "Time to get going," she said. We each took a corner of the beach blanket and let it flap free of sand in the wind. Then we folded the blanket together like partners in a square dance. When our hands came together, Grandma kissed my knuckles and my nose. The tide was coming in faster now, eating up the beach, eating up the island. We waded out to Aphrodite. Grandma started the engine in 2 tries, and we went chugging off. I looked back as Billingsgate Island began to disappear in the distance and in the sea. the spot where Grandma and I had our picnic would soon be underwater, where the chickens once pecked for grain thrown out by the lighthouse keeper's little girl 100 years ago, fish would peck at plankton. By the time Aphrodite was back at her mooring in Wellfleet Harbor, Billingsgate Island was gone, a secret beneath the waves. And online you can read on my website the author's note, which has a lot of information about Billingsgate Island. Thank you for joining me for this reading of The Disappearing Island. I hope it has inspired you to write your own stories and draw your own pictures about places that are special to you. This book is really special to me because my daughter, Artemis, modeled for Ted Lewin, for the child in the story, and Ted's wife, Betsy Lewin, who herself is the illustrator of many children's books, including Click Clack Moo, Cows That Type, she modeled for the grandmother in the story. My daughter is grown up now, and she's a children's book author also. We've co-authored several books together. Does a Fiddler Crab Fiddle? And Do Doodlebugs Doodle? Amazing Insect Facts. And Are Pirates Polite? Yes, actually they are. And we have 2 new books coming out this spring. In April, Do Jellyfish Like Peanut Butter? Amazing Sea Creature Facts. And in June, in the beginning of the month, The Grumpy Pirate, illustrated by Ashlyn Anstey. Please visit my website, CorinneDemas.com. There's educational material and some ideas for projects related to this book. And on the Disappearing Island page, you can see some of the old photographs that Ted used when he was doing the illustrations and something about the behind-the-scenes story. You can get copies of the paperback edition online.